All right, we're back here in the studio, and I want to ask you, Dean, what did you think of Senator Recto's points? He said 95% of the properties in the Philippines are not titled, and he believed, unless proven otherwise, that a valid sale was really made. In effect, bahay talaga yun ni Ginoong Vicente kasi nga come see my bonsai. So when it comes to that, I think Senator Recto is convinced that it's Mr. Vicente's property.
Well, I'm not sure about the 95%.
Okay.
But what I'm sure is that there are many properties that are not titled. No? So as I said earlier, just because there was no transfer of title in the name of Mr. Vicente, it doesn't mean that there is no valid sale. No?
Okay.
From my perspective, I think Mr. Vicente was a credible witness, and I concur with the observation of the good senator, no? That he seems to be a very credible witness. I mean, kahit anong paikot-ikot ang gawin sa kanya, hindi siya mapaikot. Ano? Pati yung mga detalye na napunta si Justice Morales doon, yung mga bonsai trees niya, hindi naman pwedeng invent ito kung hindi totoo to. No?
Oo. Kasi the prosecution believes it's simulated, sinasabi ng ilan parang katiwala siya. What's your take on that?
Dapat tinitin natin yung deed of sale. Mukha bang ngayon lang ginawa or mukhang luma na ba? Kasi kung fresh pa yung paper, ibig sabihin pwedeng ngayon lang ginawa yan, ngayon lang notaryaduhan. No? Pero kung yung dokumento medyo luma-luma na, no? At kung nabayad ng capital gains tax yung 1990, meron talagang binayaran, hindi lang ngayon. Eh, mahirap naman doktorin ng record ng BIR na nagbayad ka ng 1990 pero ngayon mo lang pala binayaran. No?
Which is why I guess Senator Recto pointed it out that in the 1990s, it's hard to simulate or fake those records coming back from the 1990s. Ganun ba yun, sir?
Oh, kasi yung capital gains, yung proof of payment of tax, hindi mo na pwedeng i-magic yan eh. Yung dokumento will show na nagbayad ka ng 1990, yung mga tax sa binayaran mo, no? Hindi lang capital gains tax, yung real estate tax, no? Eh, mahirap pikiin yan. Lalo ngayon, lahat ng tao nakatingin, no? Lahat ng mata nakatingin sa government agencies, no? So, probably, my perception, there is a document signed by the parties, no? There was a sale, a valid sale, no? It's just that it was not transferred in the name of the buyer, no?
So, in yesterday's round, I'm sure that you watched it. Of course, today will be another day. It's day 29. But day 28, when you saw how the defense and the prosecution direct examined, cross-examined Mr. Vicente, do you think the prosecution succeeded in raising questions on Mr. Vicente or not at all?
Well,
what are your thoughts?
I think that the prosecution, well, in terms of points, I would say I'll go for the defense, no? Because Mr. Vicente appears to be credible, no? His story is likewise credible, no? I mean, despite all the questions asked of him, he stuck to his position that there was a valid sale, he enjoyed possession of the property, no? So I think for that particular round, I'll go with the defense.
Okay. All right. Now, when it comes to Ms. Bayuga, all right, she had brought the alpha list. She had brought a list of all the allowances of the Chief Justice from 2002 to 2011, amounting to roughly 21.6 million. What should the senator judges be looking for, or what should the defense be proving to answer for the 35 million pesos in the SAL and in in the bank accounts in 2010?
I think there's no way you can impeach Ms. Bayuga, no? Dahil based sa public documents, eh. I mean, totoo naman ito yung tinanggap ni Chief Justice, no? Ang tanong ngayon, ito, wala ba ginastos Chief Justice for 10 years? Ano ba ang cost of living during that time, no? Kung ang bawang income niya for 10 years, 21 million, magkano kayang ginastos niya? Halimbawa ba 10 million o 11 million for 10 years? Ito na lang natitira, 10 million. Enough ba to buy these properties? No? So I think the defense should present additional evidence, no? To prove that Mr. Chief Justice had the capacity to acquire those properties on top of whatever savings he earned for the past 10 years.
Okay. Adele, you can join in. Very interesting. Dean had said that in yesterday's round, with regards to Mr. Vicente, the defense won that one because Mr. Vicente seemed to be a very credible and honest witness. Your thoughts, Adele? Go ahead.
Well, I agree with Dean Divina. Definitely, he seemed like a credible witness. But as to winning rounds or losing rounds, I think it's still a little bit early. Professor Divina raised a very good point that although 21 million seems like a big amount, but still, you also have to include what are the expenses. And in fact, Karen and Professor Divina, what I'd like to share is, if you recall with my interview with Attorney Kicho of the defense, he said they will be presenting people from the Senate Electoral Tribunal and I think either the Presidential Electoral Tribunal or the House of Representatives Electoral Tribunal, because the membership of a justice or the Chief Justice in these tribunals, they get a separate allowance.
Okay.
And I was informed that this is actually quite big. It's a very substantial allowance.
Iba pa siya, Adele, sa mga binanggit
Yes.
kahapon.
Yes, I think that's why when I asked Attorney Kicho, is this still separate from the income that was testified to by by Mrs. Bayuga? Sabi niya, it is different. So I guess what the defense is trying to do now is to present more evidence to show that maybe the Chief Justice might have the financial capacity to purchase the properties that he did.
Okay. So, Dean, coming from Adele's point is, okay, the defense will prove that the income is legal, it's above board, everything is coming in as a matter of right because he's the Chief Justice.
And enough to acquire those properties.
Yes. Now, what would the defense need to show why it was not mentioned in the SALN, the cash on hand? Is that a challenge for them?
That's a big challenge for them, no? How come the cash deposits were not included in the SALN, no?
Okay.
Because when the law speaks of assets, it refers to both real and personal. And obviously that includes cash. No?
I want to ask you, Dean, dapat ba bawat 5 ilagay mo sa SALN?
If you
yung
are-
cash on hand?
If you are to be faithful to the spirit, no, of the law, no, you have to disclose everything. No? But the question is everybody doing that? Are all impeachable officials, for example, faithfully, no, recording their assets, no, into the SALN? And in case of omission, assuming that, of course, without prejudging the Senate, supposing there is a conviction on this particular ground, no, non-disclosure of assets in the SALN, will that same standard now be applied against all impeachable officials? That might set also a very dangerous...
Go ahead, Adele.
That's a good point, Karen. In fact, Professor Divina and Karen, Senator Recto did raise that point, and I thought it's a very interesting point that, under the law on SALNs, Republic Act 6713, you are actually allowed to still correct your SALN. So this April 30, will the Chief Justice actually make corrections to his SALN, and how will that affect the impeachment proceedings now? I'd like to toss that question
I want to ask you
to both of you. I think that's a very interesting point.
That's a very valid point. But there is also Dean, no? He is also a member of our
kayo?
association.
Dean.
Yes.
Pareho
Yes, we
Dean
have
ang
two deans
nandito.
with you,
Dean,
Karen.
Adele is just being humble, but he's also Dean, no, of a law school.
Thank
no?
you, thank you.
In Cagayan
Thank
de
you,
Oro,
Dean.
no? That's a very good question, no? But I don't think it will cure the defect, no? Because the charge is based on
Disclosure.
non-disclosure, accurate disclosure, no, of the assets in the SALN, no.
2010.
I think the biggest question is that an impeachable offense? Assuming
Okay.
there was an omission on the part of the Chief Justice, is that in the level of an impeachable offense?
Is it? I want to
Well,
ask you, is it?
If it is,
Because
at
that's
that
been
level,
debated by
my
so
only
many.
point is everyone should be judged based on that standard, to be fair.
Okay. So I want to ask you, I'm curious. I mean, I know what the impeachable offenses are. Senator Kiko Pangilinan said betrayal of public trust may not necessarily be a high crime. So would you consider that betrayal of public trust if you don't fully disclose in the SALN?
But if you go by the records of the CONCOM, no, the CONCOM, no? The definition of betrayal of public trust is any act unbecoming of a public official.
Okay, so unbecoming
That's
is
very broad,
okay,
to
it's
include even non-disclosure of assets in the SALN. No? But whether or not the Senate would view it that way, no, is the biggest question. No?
Okay, Adele?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, Dean Divina. But there is also another view, and this is, to quote another former dean, no, si Father Bernas, to him the enumeration in Article 11 of what are the impeachable offenses, we have a technical term for this, Karen, it's called eius dem generis, meaning that if it's a certain class, dapat more or less pareho sila. So according to Father Bernas, betrayal of public trust should also raise, whatever betrayal of public trust we're talking about, it should raise to the level of a high crime, following that principle of eius dem generis. So that's another view. Of course, a more liberal view is, the moment you do something that is unbecoming, that makes you morally unfit, then you should be impeached and removed from office.
No, because ito, hypothetically lang to, Adele and Dino, just for discussion purposes, let's say an impeachable officer had a mansion in San Francisco or Beverly Hills, hindi nilagay sa SALN. And the mansion was luxurious. It, let's say, shocked, let's say, the Filipino people. Paano po yun, Adele and Dean? Ano yun? Nasaan yun? High crime ba yun? O, impeachable offense na ba yun? Go ahead.
Well, pwedeng betrayal of public trust at kung may bribery o may corruption, pwedeng corruption. If it was acquired through ill-gotten means, no? Through corruption, then corruption is also a ground for impeachment under the Constitution.
But not writing it in the SALN, would that be considered betrayal
I think
of
it's more
public
betrayal
trust?
of public trust. No?
So would that...
Yeah, that's what.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Kain. I just wanted to add that I think that's what makes this specific article a little bit difficult. Kasi, di ba, Dean Divina, kunyari, may nahuli tayong justice na nagnanakaw, or halimbawa, meron siyang bribe na tao, for example. Parang it's just so clear. But here, actually, the non-inclusion, we're putting it under betrayal of public trust. So you have to go through that process. You have to ask yourself the question, is this non-inclusion, does that rise to the level of betrayal of public trust that makes you impeachable? So that's why I think it's a little bit more difficult for the senators, because they will have to appreciate and use their own concept of what is betrayal of public trust.
Now I want to ask you both, since we're waiting for the senator judges to come in. I want to ask you, because there was a lawyer who was disbarred because he had, I think, he was charged with adultery, Adele. We don't have to name names, no? But I was surprised that in the legal profession, if you're a lawyer and charged with adultery, you're disbarred? Am I right?
It's a ground for disbarment.
Divina, yes.
It's a ground for disbarment.
Okay, and there was a lawyer that was disbarred. So let's say it's an impeachable officer, a Supreme Court Justice, Adele and Dean, with the same issue. Let's say having another family, having mistress. It may not be a high crime, but where would that fall under?
But it would seem not to fall within any of the grounds, no, under the Constitution, no. Obviously, it's not treason, it's not bribery, it's not corruption, it's not high crime, and it's not betrayal of public trust. It's a betrayal of marital trust.
Yeah, but the weird thing is you can be disbarred in the legal profession if you
But the
have
grounds
one.
for disbarment are different from the grounds for impeachment under the Constitution.
But how could you be a Supreme Court Justice if you're no longer a lawyer?
Well, that's a good point. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. If you're disbarred, that's a very good point.
No, but you can only be removed from office as a justice through impeachment, because you're an impeachable officer. I think we're about to start, Karen.
Yes. All right. So for our viewers watching ANC, we've had a bit of a discussion there, of course. It's day 29 right now of the impeachment trial. What are we expecting today? We're expecting that Ms. Bayuga will be returning. She will be cross-examined by the prosecution this time. Yesterday, she presented allowances, a list of the payroll, the salary, which the Chief Justice had earned from 2002 to 2011. And she also presented the alpha list, proving that it was submitted to the BIR from the years of 2005 to 2010. And the defense will be presenting another witness today. We presume on Article 2 as well. The other witness, si Ginoong Vicente, has been dismissed yesterday, and it's about to start with the Senate President Enrile already at the rostrum. Yesterday, there were 19 senator judges present. We'll see how many are attending the session this afternoon.
The continuation of the impeachment trial of the Honorable Chief Justice Renato C. Corona of the Supreme Court is hereby called to order. We shall be led in prayer by Senator Jinggoy Ejercito Estrada.
Panginoon Diyos, dakilang Ama namin sa langit, kinikilala namin ang inyong kabanalan. Muli, sa araw pong itong Panginoon, ay lumalapit kami sa inyo upang humingi ng inyong basbas, gabay at patnubay upang patuloy namin magampanan ang maayos ang tungkulin na nayata sa amin bilang mahukom